Whether you're a self-taught musician, have a teacher, or you're already a professional, this show is meant to help you with knowledge, mindset, craft, and strategies to improve your overall musicianship so that you can become the best musician you can be, regardless of your goals. Welcome to Musicianship Mastery. Hello and welcome to episode number 116. My name is David Lane and it is great to be with you once again. I hope all of you are doing well today, and I want to go ahead and just get into today's topic, which may need a little bit of explanation if you have made an assumption about what this episode is about based on the title, Dealing with FOMO as a Musician. I realize that I have quite a few listeners outside of the U.S., so let me go ahead and make sure, just in case you don't know, what FOMO is. FOMO stands for the fear of missing out. It's a powerful psychological state that explains so much of what we tend to do in our society. Things such as social media. How many people are on social media just because they don't want to miss anything? In fact, before things like Instagram and Facebook kind of changed their profile so that they were targeted more towards content be interested rather than just the people that you're following. It used to be that you'd want to scroll and scroll and scroll and make sure you hadn't missed anything. Blockbuster movies and shows and best-selling books. The fact that they are blockbusters, the fact that they are bestsellers, leads people to want to watch or read because of FOMO. Which I realize as I say that's saying fear of, so that's not quite, because of FOMO. People accept social invitations and they do things all the time because of FOMO. So when I talk about dealing with FOMO as a musician, I suspect that one interpretation you have, something you might think I'm going to talk about today, is when you have rehearsal or you have a performance, you have a gig, and therefore you can't watch this live television event, or you can't go to watch someone else's theater production or their show or whatever, or you can't go to a birthday party. It's the classic meme, I have rehearsal. While some of what I'm going to talk about today will indirectly touch on that very thing, that is not mainly what I'm talking about today. So before I continue, I feel like that I need to pause just for a moment to say who this episode is for. I try to do that in some form or another at the beginning of each episode because not all episodes are for the exact same audience. And that's not to say that if this isn't directly for you, that you can't get something out of it. But today's episode is meant for professional musicians or those who are aspiring to be professional musicians. That is to say, if you are studying in school as a music major, or if you intend to go to school as a music major, or you've been a hobbyist amateur musician and you're wanting to take that next step. Well, whether you are already a professional musician or whether you just plan to become one, the type of FOMO that I'm talking about is something that you're going to have to face. So what I'm talking about today, dealing with FOMO as a musician, it's about not being able to do everything that you've trained to do as a musician. It's about saying no to opportunities so that you can say yes to the things that you really enjoy doing and the things that give you the most energy. This podcast began as the Musician Toolkit, and the premise of the original podcast is still intact. I don't go over this quite as much as I used to, but the idea was that you wanted to diversify your skill set as a musician. You wanted to focus on 21 specific skill sets that would allow you to be the best possible musician. And some of these things include being a conductor, being an accompanist, playing well on a primary instrument, playing competently on a secondary instrument, the ability to compose, the ability to improvise, the ability to teach. Now there's a line that you can cross when you are diversifying your skills emotionally, and that is when you start to think, I can do all these things, so therefore I should do all of these things. I should take a job as a conductor. I should be a performer. I should be a teacher. I should be a composer. So there are several reasons why this is a problem. And the first is that trying to be good at everything will keep you from being really good or great in anything. And actually, I think there's probably another way that I could express that. And that's just trying to do everything will keep you from being good at anything. Now, again, this episode is targeted toward professionals and aspiring professionals. So another thing that comes from this that's a problem is that if you market yourself as doing a little bit of everything, it actually is very confusing. And it's going to not only confuse people who don't really know what you do, but it's going to confuse people who thought they knew what you do, but they see that you do all these other things. I currently have an issue with my kitchen floor, something that needs addressing, something that needs work. So if I'm looking for people to come take a look at it, and I go to a website or I go to a social media page, and I see that someone offers all of these services. They paint houses, they fix roofs, they do yard work, they do landscaping, and they fix floors, and maybe several other things. And I compare that when I go to someone else and they say all they do is they fix floors. Well, if budget's not an option, who do you think I'm going to choose? I'm going to choose the person who practices more often than not on fixing floors. Likewise, if I'm looking for a landscaper, I'm probably going to go with someone who just does landscaping. And when I want someone to paint my house, I'm going to go with someone who just paints houses. Now, I'm being a little bit hyperbolic. It's certainly possible to do a good job while also doing some other things. But if you're trying to market yourself on your website as a jack of all trades, you are going to be perceived as you probably are a master of none. And there's another problem with trying to do all things professionally, trying to spread yourself out to get as many types of gigs as possible. And that is that it keeps you from experiencing a truly well-rounded life where music is a big part, but not the only thing. And this is just a personal side note. I've met a lot of musicians for who music is disproportionately a main thing in their life, to the point to where they really can't picture any part of their life without it. And I have personally never met anyone who fits that description who I would call happy. These people seem to be mostly very miserable. So before this episode is done, I'm going to share what I think makes up kind of the recipe, the ingredients that you need for a well-rounded life. And it's one that music should be part of it, but it shouldn't be the entire thing. Now, there is a solution that I'm going to talk about that will reconcile what this podcast talks about, the diversification of your skill set, with what I'm saying today, and that is that you should focus your energy into very few things as a musician. And that is creating job descriptions for yourself that incorporate multiple elements of what you do. It's a bit of a difference. It's not saying yes to a whole variety of jobs. It's coming up with a type of job that describes you, and you put all of these things to work to make yourself more valuable than you would be if you were just taking a job to do one single thing. If that's confusing, don't worry, I'm going to get to that. So, literally off the top of my head, here is a list of some of the things that I have done and some of the things that I still do, kind of mixed together as a musician. Or I should also say as an artist in general, because I will include podcasting. I've had 2 podcasts. I've taught privately. I've taught at a college. I've played piano, I've played French horn, I've taught both those instruments. I compose, I've taught composition, I've given tutorials in music theory. I've made YouTube videos, I've played piano for weddings, for retirement homes. I've composed music for films, I've arranged for musicals, I've recorded tracks for musical theater, I've accompanied in voice lessons, I have recorded accompaniment tracks for singers and those who need such tracks. I've been a church pianist, organist, music director, I've conducted choirs, I've conducted handbells, and I've done everything that I said for a paycheck. Some of those paychecks have been very small, but I have done all of that for pay, professionally. So there are two things that I would recommend. One is that you find the things that you really enjoy doing out of all those things, and you combine them into a single job description for yourself. Now, it might be adding to a job that you already have, but what you're doing is you're making yourself stand out as being more unique. For example, let's say that you like to teach, that you also compose, and that you play more than one instrument. Well, as a teacher, you can create lessons that combine these elements. Your instrumental students can learn composition. Your composers can learn orchestration that you know from your own experience playing multiple instruments, and also practical performance skills. Let's say that you can play a variety of keyboards and that you also compose and that you also conduct. Well, those skills fit really nicely into any church music director job or any theater music director gig. You also can become a live performer, someone who gives shows, that does touring, that incorporates all of these things you do: composing, arranging, experience with music technology, playing multiple instruments, using your voice. So what you should be looking for are those opportunities where you can put your energy into one venue, into one location, into one job description, but not make it so singularly focused that you're only doing one type of thing, but that you're putting all of these things together, or as many as you can. And that's why I'm doing this episode, because even after you do that, you're going to find where there's still a lot of things that you're not doing, and that's where FOMO comes in. So I've thought of 6 things that I have given up over the past decade. And this is in no particular order, but these are things that I have given up and that I have felt a sense of FOMO before I gave them up and after I gave them up. The first one is a big one, and that is expending energy trying to become a film composer. Now, that's not 100% accurate to say that, because I have been a film composer. I have more than a dozen credits, but they're entirely for indie films and short films. When people have asked, would I know anything that you've scored, I have to tell them no, not unless you've regularly gone to festivals where they feature short films over the last few years. But no, just going to Netflix, going to the movie theater, no, there's nothing that you would have accidentally seen that I had scored. And I've done the research, I've done the reflection of what I would need to do in order to take that next step as a film composer. And one of the things that you find out for sure is that you really can't do it by dabbling. You might be able to get a side job to kind of help make ends meet, but it has to be something that you can give up just like that. Because when opportunity comes, and that's assuming you've done the right things, you've moved to the right place, you've met the right people, you've said the right things, you're going to be put into a situation where you have to compose an hour of music or more in a very short amount of time and make it sound good. And you can't do that while trying to maintain all the other things in your life that you can't drop. And once I decided that teaching was not a temporary part of my life, but it was something that was an important, permanent part of my life, and that I was happy living here in North Carolina and did not want to uproot and go to somewhere like Los Angeles, it made sense that I needed to drop this from my life. But I didn't for a very long time. And I'm talking about well more than 20 years after I received my degree in film music composition, my Master of Music. It was very hard to say that degree is not going to get me what the degree said it would. But that doesn't mean that the skills that I learned from becoming a film composer and the specific type of orchestration and arranging skills that went with it couldn't be used for other purposes, which I have. It also doesn't mean that I have said no or would say no to opportunities if they came my way. I'm not saying I would refuse to take any gigs scoring films. It's just saying that if that's going to happen in my life, it's going to happen because of other things I do, not because of going all in and trying to become a film composer. So this is the thing. You should still stay open to opportunities. You're not choosing fixed paths. You're choosing paths that work for you right now, understanding that you can't do everything. So some other things that I've done include teaching and playing French horn. I was never a great French horn player. I enjoyed it. I used to offer lessons to beginners because it was a way to fill some of my slots when I couldn't get or didn't think that I could get enough piano students or composition students. But I always felt a little guilty about it because I knew at a point I was going to have to refer them to someone else. And someone else that I would refer them to could have been teaching them the same things and keep going with them. They wouldn't have to change teachers. But then the other thing is I realized there was a day, again, less than 10 years ago, that I realized it had been 2 years since I had picked up the horn for more than about 10 minutes at a time. And there was about a 6-month period where I didn't pick it up at all. It was taking up space in my house, and it was a reminder of something that I just no longer felt passionate to do, but I kept it around just in case I could do it or suddenly changed my mind that I wanted to. So I sold that horn to a colleague for their student who was the same age I was when I bought that horn. And it was for the same reason. It was a double French horn. I was on a single French horn. I needed a double. This same student was in the same situation. They had a single horn and they wanted a double horn. And I was able to provide that for them. Now, I've had moments here and there where I wish that I could play horn again. But it's not a very profound sense of loss. Something else that I've discontinued is focusing on teaching all ages and levels in piano. There are certain types of students that I'm not going to say that I say no to, because I always have a free consultation with each prospective student and make sure that I can offer what they're looking for. But I don't really encourage young beginners anymore. There are many, many teachers in this area who do a great job with young beginners. I also don't eagerly take on very serious piano students who are seeking to become like piano performance majors. I was not a piano performance major. I feel like I lack in teaching the most advanced repertoire out there, and I don't play a lot of it myself. There are other teachers who do, other teachers who have a passion for that. I also don't teach students who say that they want to learn jazz, and that's all they want to do. If they say, I'd like to learn a little bit of jazz in addition to some other things, then I'm fine with that. But I don't focus on jazz, so I'm not the best teacher for that. What I found that keeps me busy are some limitations. I only offer 45-minute lessons. I teach mainly adults who are beginners or intermediate, and I teach composition theory and orchestration skills to anybody who would like to learn. And it's a very specific type of offering. I get people who are adult prospects that have found that that is what I offer as far as teaching adult beginners and adult intermediate, the piano specifically. and the composition offerings are not confusing. I'm clear that that's a separate type of lesson, but I limit to really those two types. Now, I still teach students of other ages, but they have been exceptions, and they've been exceptions that I've been willing to take on that I enjoy, but they're not the type of student that I am seeking. I no longer offer services for playing piano at retirement centers. In fact, I gave up a retirement center gig after 19 years for various reasons, and I have not sought to replace it. I also don't offer services for playing piano at weddings, which is something that I used to do on my website. I don't completely say no when I'm offered. However, I'm hardly ever offered because I don't advertise for it. I don't think a lot of people know that I have played for weddings before. And one that stings a little bit because it's still ongoing and it's been a 3 to 4 year process, and that is giving up theater music directing. So in 2022, I did a show. It was a production of Into the Woods. And I pretty much said after that I'm not going to be doing much of anything. I'm going to be really reducing the amount of shows that I do. And this was really the first full year after the pandemic started that things were kind of back to normal. And in 2019, I music directed or was heavily involved in 11 productions that year. And I said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 at the most. And I did that throughout 2024. I am currently music directing a local production of Oklahoma, my second time through that show. And I have told anybody and everybody who wants to know, this is my swan song. This is my last show that I am music directing. And I feel like I've been firmer and harder on that than maybe is expected or maybe that I should. Part of me feels like I should say, I might be back, but I've been very firm, very concrete, using language that I'm not comfortable using, saying this is the end, this is the last one. Now, I have saved a caveat for a specific situation, and that is it'll be the last show that I music direct in which I am not also listed as the arranger for the project. So I have a partnership with 2 writers. I've arranged 3 musicals for them, and sometimes we have workshops, we have opportunities, and there are revisions, but there's going to be a performance. In fact, there's one coming up in September, and I will be music directing that. But I have made a hard no decision on this because of FOMO. It's not just the FOMO of having made this decision, but there's something about this that I can't believe I haven't actually said this yet, because this is super important. And that is, theater music directing is something, one, I'm quite good at. It's something that I do very well. And 2, not a lot of people in this area also do it well. And when you put those things together, there's a sense of, I should do this. If I don't do it, who will? Now, it's not quite that extreme. There are other people. There just aren't a lot of people. But we have a minimum of 3 universities with music programs around here, and we have new talent that are graduating or developing all the time that would be happy to have those experiences. So it's not quite that bad. But when I think of things that I'm good at, there's this sense of FOMO if I don't do it. And it's a sense of guilt of not doing it. There's a theater in this area for which I've been recording tracks for 5 to 6 productions per year for the past few years. And it took up so much of my time that I shipped it off to the only colleague that I could think of who also had the same skill set and studio setup to do this very thing. And that's something that I do well. I actually even enjoy it to a point. That can make it another element of FOMO. But it took up so much of my time that I wasn't able to do the things that I was truly passionate about. You see, it's not enough to just say I enjoy it. It's not enough to say that I'm good at it. It's not enough, and it's not an excuse to say I'm one of just a few people who can do it. You need to be passionate for it. It has to be something that you're willing and longing to put a lot of your time into. One other thing that I didn't think of, I didn't write this down in my notes, but as I've said before, I have 2 podcasts. You're on one of them right now. The other one was my original podcast. It was Life in the Pit. And when I started Musicianship Mastery, which used to be the Musician Toolkit, the plan was that this would be my main podcast, but that I would continue on a fairly semi-regular basis, maybe at least once a month, doing Life in the Pit episodes. And I found that I couldn't. And I've tried to make changes here and there, and I still find that I can't really do it. But part of what holds me back is that I'm just not that interested in that podcast anymore. But there's definitely a sense of FOMO that arises out of guilt, because as far as I can tell, Life in the Pit is still the only podcast out there that focuses on musicians, instrumentalists who play for musical theater productions. It's a specific type of musician in a specific type of situation. And I have to remind myself, well, there's still about 80 episodes out there, mostly with guests from all around the world talking about this very thing. And that resource is still there. It's just not very current. But that has been a podcast I have had to let slide, solely because lacking time and lacking passion. But that doesn't make the feelings of FOMO go away. So here are 5 principles that I want to give you for dealing with FOMO as a musician. The first is simply to realize you can't do everything, no matter what your area is. If you're a curious person, and I believe most musicians are, you are going to have more skills than you're going to be able to use. You're going to have more interests than you're going to be able to explore. There are going to be things that you can't do. There are going to be parties you can't go to, TV shows that you can't take time for, books you're not going to be able to read. There's just always going to be more that you can do. There are going to be places you're not going to be able to travel to. You have 16 waking hours in a day. You only have a few dozen years to enjoy life. I'm not trying to be depressing, but you just don't have that much time. You can't do everything. So the first thing you need to do is you need to accept that. You need to realize, I can't do everything, not even all the things that I wish I could do. So the second thing I would say is you should give yourself permission to leave out certain things, and if possible, even take pride in it. In the past 2 months, I have watched 2 things that are new. 1 movie, 1 TV episode. That's it. The third thing is, as a musician, put more energy into the things that you say matter the most. If you really identify as a composer, you want to be a composer, you need to take time to compose. Whatever you determine to be your primary instrument, you need to spend more time practicing that. And you need to seek professional opportunities that allow you to use those things that matter the most. The fourth thing, and this is something that you have to embrace, you need to say to yourself, it's not my problem if I'm one of the few who can do it. You're not obligated to do something because you've taken time to learn how to do it and not many other people have. You don't have to do anything where passion is no longer driving you to do it, especially if the economic incentive is not that strong. Because that's the thing. Some of the things I've given up, they haven't been 6 or even 5-figure jobs, sometimes not even 4 figures. So you need to say to yourself, it's okay. Yes, I'm one of the few people who can do this, but it's not my problem. It's the responsibility of other people to take up the slack, or maybe this need isn't as strong as others think it is. The fifth suggestion for overcoming FOMO as a musician is maybe a little bit outside the box, but it's one that I think is particularly helpful, and that is to have a non-musical hobby. Have something that you enjoy doing that isn't music. So that leads me into the final thing that I want to talk about today, and that is what I think makes a well-rounded life. These are areas that I think that you should try to check in on, see how you're doing, and try to nurture these so that you have a well-rounded life. And it's 8 aspects of your life. And they're not in any particular order, but the first one is your art. If you are a professional musician, that means you want to get a paycheck from doing your music, but you want to remember why you're doing it. And art really seeks to ask that. Why do we do what we do? You're a creator, whether you're doing that with your hands on an instrument, or whether you're doing that with staff paper, or whether you're doing that with a baton in rehearsal. You're an artist. You want to be practicing to develop your art. You want to spend that time in the practice room, at the table composing, and getting the best thing that you can offer to the world. The second is your business or your job. You need to figure out what it is that will allow you to make an income that you find acceptable or desirable, and focus on the work that you have time to do that will allow you to meet those goals. A lot of times it's as simple as asking yourself, what kind of work can I get and how much does it pay per hour? Because some of the things I gave up were things that I realized were paying me a little more than minimum wage. The third branch of a well-rounded life is relationships and friendships. Musicians are very bad about this, except for maybe the people they're having a gig with if they go out to a 24-hour diner or breakfast place after their gig or whatever. But taking time to check in on those that you call friends, or if you have a spouse, if you have a partner, being engaging in that relationship. People die of loneliness more than any other known cause. So it's really important that you do take time for that. The fourth aspect is health and fitness. Make sure that you're eating well. Make sure that you're exercising. The fifth thing is nature. I live in a city, but I also have parks nearby, and I'm not too far away from several places I can go hiking, but it is important to get outside. Music, unfortunately, is an indoor job, but humans, like all other animals, are designed to be outside. This is where we get to be among nature. We get to be among other life that's not just like us. And there's a vibrancy that comes with that, and numerous health benefits. The sixth and seventh branches, I might have been able to combine them, but I kept them separate. The sixth element of a well-rounded life is taking time to read. Reading is such a powerful way to spend your downtime because you have to do more work with your brain to get the picture. You can't just see it presented in the form of a television show or movie or even a play. There's work to be done while your brain creates the image based on the words that you're reading. So whether it is just fiction for fun, whether it's literature, whether it's nonfiction, taking time to read will enrich your life. And so kind of related to that is number 7, continuing education. You should be taking time each week to go to YouTube, to read books, to listen to podcasts that will help you become better at not just your music. I happen to love history, and I study things. I read history books, I listen to history podcasts, I watch videos on history. I also do Duolingo, not just for Spanish and French, but I also do their math app as well to kind of stay up on basic geometry and some basic algebra. It's just practice for keeping those skills as sharp as I can. And the eighth aspect of a well-rounded life is religion, faith, or a moral philosophy. So you know whether or not you're religious, whether or not that is something like Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, and you already have that as part of your life, if that's something that you have. But more and more, a lot of people don't really identify as being religious, don't have a specific religion, but taking time with a journal every so often and just thinking about what is your moral philosophy, what are the things that you value as far as being a good person, as far as being a servant to others, something that enriches your life, living among others, but also accepting yourself, loving yourself. This is the thing that religion tries to answer, is how we live with ourselves, how we live with others, and how we do that in a way that is fruitful and productive. So as I get to the end of this episode, I'm not sure if I've answered anything to a fully satisfactory way. And it's because this is a tough topic and it's something that I still deal with on a weekly, if not a daily basis. This fear of missing out on the things that I could do because I have the skills, because I could even be in high demand. But I don't want music to take up my whole life. I don't want to not have the time and energy to devote into the things that I think that matter. And I give myself permission to let those other things go. So what are your thoughts after hearing this episode? You can tell me with your own voice by going to speakpipe.com/Musician Toolkit and leaving a message with your own voice. And as always, you can just send me a message through my website at davidlanemusic.com. There's a contact form right on the homepage. Since this episode was talking to professional musicians, I do want to just remind you about something that I hardly ever talk about, but you see it in the description of every episode, and that is the link right at the bottom for FONS. There's a free trial if you were a teacher, if you want to do that. I don't talk about it that much, but FONS is something that has really changed how I feel about teaching, because it takes all the things that I don't like and automates them. I don't ask for payments anymore. Payment is deducted automatically. I don't go back and forth about what times I have on my schedule. There's a booking link on my website that goes to my FONS calendar, and it shows what times are available. They don't have to wonder what my rates are. There are packages that they can select, and it tells how much they'll cost. And they can select those. And there's so many other things that it makes it worth it for the subscription, but you don't have to pay right away. You can do that for free while you figure out what it is you'd like to do. And it's a good app. They are owned by Make Music. It's the same people that own Alfred Music. And I'm very good friends with the founder, Eric Branner, who allowed me to be part of his Facebook group as long as I wanted, just trying to learn about it. And I was there for at least a year before I signed up as a client, and I've never had any FOMO associated with being on FONS. You can use my link in the show notes to start a free trial. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with you again next week.